Organisations. I'm really excited to have my good friend John Poulsen to share with us some of his insights on things like leadership and other things important in law firms. So John is the former managing partner and CEO of Squire Patton Boggs, and he led Minter Ellison Perth Go Global Strategy, which then led to the merger with Squires. In 2017, John founded People, Passion, Performance, which is a consulting practice focused on law firms, where John shares his real-world experience in transforming workplace cultures and mentoring and coaching leaders. So it's fair to say that John knows a few things about success and performance in a law firm, and we're really blessed to have you with us, John. I'm really excited to have you here, so thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure. I should probably just say, in 2017, it was sort of focused, People, Passion and Performance was focused on law firms, but most of my work nowadays is out in other industry sectors. I still do some work for law firms, but yeah, so you never know what's going to happen when you take a plunge.
Exactly, and that's great. You should share all of this stuff with other, God knows other professions and industries need this sort of stuff as well. But we're excited that you started out with lawyers and you know lawyers a little bit better. So I just wanted to sort of start with asking you some questions about what led to the birth of your consulting business and how that came about.
Yeah. Well, I've been a lawyer for over 30 years, and the last 12 years as a managing partner, as you said, Minter Ellison Perth, and then taking the firm global. And spent the last couple of years of my life working in Sydney. Not my life, my legal life. Yes. Working in Sydney, building the Sydney office of Squires. And I've always said, I think, 5 to 6 years is a good time in leadership. 12 years is probably too long. And I woke up on a long weekend in September 2017 and turned to my wife and said, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something different. And that's where sort of People, Passion and Performance came from. But it was sort of interesting because one of the guys I'd mentored for many years happened to be in Sydney at the same time. Yeah. And I'd quit as managing partner and said, we went out for dinner together. He lives in the States. And I said, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. And he said, push, because my name was Pushy Poulsen. Not in a nasty sense, but just I love making things happen. Yeah. And he said to me, do what you're good at. And I said to him, what's that? And he said, working with people, using your passion and getting performance. And so that's how People, Passion, Performance was born.
Beautiful.
So it's been a really, really interesting, it's actually, I didn't really start till February 2018, but so it's just over 2 years, or it's almost exactly 2 years. Yeah. And it's been a really, really interesting journey because what I started out with was what I'd called a toolkit for leaders, all the stuff I'd learned about leadership. Yeah. And perhaps I'll share with you, I've developed over the years a definition of what a leader was or a leader is.
Perfect. That was going to be my next question.
Yeah. Good mind reader. And so for me, a leader is someone who uses positive energy.
Yeah.
And I'll just stop for the energy at a sec. It's really, energy is so important. And the best way I can describe it is if you get in the lift on a Monday morning and there's someone low energy who's sitting there like this,
yeah,
you actually feel the energy drain. And leadership takes energy. You actually have to bring people along and inspire them. So for me, a leader is someone who uses positive energy.
Yes.
To enable, inspire people to be the best that they can be. So it's not about you, it's about them. Yeah. And uses compassion, because I think compassion is a really important word. So a leader is someone who uses positive energy, inspires and enables people to be the best that they can be. Yes. With compassion in an ethical way, because ethics are really important. And you take Trump, he might be a leader, but there's no ethics there. Yes. In a strategic direction, because you've got to have a direction, and then is relentless in what I call Nike, which is just doing it and making it.
Yeah.
So that's my sort of definition of leadership, and it's been really interesting. And I suppose another one that really resonates with me is the work by Professor Jim Collins from Stanford University, who wrote Good to Great, Built to Last, and How the Mighty Fall. And he talked about in his books, having studied great companies over many years, was what he called level 5 leadership. And really the essence of that is what's nowadays, I think, called servant leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, I mean, he sums it up by saying, when things go right, look
Mm-hmm.
out the window, and when things go wrong, look in the mirror. And so it comes from you. What's been really interesting for me is over the last 2 years doing a lot of learning in psychology, neuroscience, philosophy, some of this, spiritual books as well. And one of the things, there's a great book about adaptive leadership, which really embodies those things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in law firms, what happens is, on the one side, you've got sort of command and control. On the other side, you've got empowerment and trust. Law firms have tended to be command and control because of the hierarchical nature. And that's around policies, procedures, this is the way, and it's more tell. Whereas the empowerment and trust model is about enabling people to be the best that they can be, but how do you move them forward? Well, to me, it's around values, it's around purpose, and it's around behaviours. And in their book, what's it called? I've lent it to someone, around adaptive leadership. What they talk about is technical leadership.
Yes.
So particularly in law firms, the people who become leaders are often the most successful lawyers, and they're technically very able. They've probably got, good business development skills.
Yeah.
But technical leadership is about knowing all the answers,
Mm-hmm.
and telling people, and it is much, much more command and control.
Mm.
Whereas adaptive leadership is really what I think is the leadership required today, which is actually not knowing the answers, enabling other people to come up with the ideas, creating a safe environment of trust, an environment where people are prepared to talk up. They're not scared.
That's right.
So at the absolute base of any successful organisation is trust.
Yes.
And it's at the most fundamental level, and it's about vulnerability as well. So leaders have to be vulnerable.
Yes.
But the greatest skill of an adaptive leader is to actually create that environment, but then also to almost hold the tension of, it can be very uncomfortable, not telling, letting it come, but holding that tension and really enabling people to step up and step forward and have healthy disagreements, etc. And there's very few law firms, I think, where that is the type of leadership that is.
Well, this is something that I'm sort of seeing, and it's a shame really, because we have the potential to bring up more good leaders if we show great leadership. So I was telling you earlier, I put up a post last week about young lawyers entering the profession with a lot of hunger and ambition and loyalty, and they really want to perform, but they may not have the skills to translate all of that into billables or efficiency or productivity. And they're really screaming out for that really good, strong leadership to help them sort of progress their careers. And what happens a lot of the time is, if they don't get that leadership, they lose confidence in their abilities because they're consistently seeing their ambition fail to translate into billables, which is, at the end of the day, what firms, I'm generalizing, but that's what's important, the bottom line. Or they leave looking for good leadership, or they leave the profession altogether, which is why we have such a high dropout rate after 5 years post-admission. And so that generated a lot of discussion, and a lot of people were saying, well, that's what's great, but what do you want us to do? How do we be good leaders for these young people, for our teams, so that we can promote them? So you mentioned, energy and values. Now, if I'm listening to this for the first time and I'm, a little bit unsure as to how to put this into practice, how do I do that? Can you give us maybe some practical detailed skills that we need?
It's a really interesting thing, because I do a lot of work in coaching and mentoring leaders and emerging leaders. And on the one hand, there's a view that you're a born leader, and on the other hand, that you can become. I think it's sort of somewhere in the middle. The biggest thing for someone to grasp who wants to be an adaptive leader is, it's not about me. It's about we. And our egos are such big things. But when you've grasped that actually this is for the greater good, this is about we. And one of the really interesting things I learned in my journey through one of the courses was about leaders being on the balcony and on the dance floor.
Mm.
And when I first heard that, I thought, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Sounds like a
Leaders
Christmas
are,
party. No, I'm joking.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense, especially at Christmas parties. You know, on the balcony, you're you know, being strategic. On the dance floor, you're being sort of management operational. So I thought, oh, that makes sense. But
Yeah.
then, as I got deeper, it actually means something completely different, and it means being on the balcony of yourself
Mm.
while you are in the dance floor as a leader, and being very, very aware of what is triggering and motivating you as a leader. Are you, you know, searching for being liked or loved? Are you searching for people to say you're so good?
Yeah.
Um, or are you, you know, being really, really present, and not being triggered by the things around you? So to me, that's the when you can start to see yourself in action,
Yeah.
what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, and how are you energizing people. That's the starting point.
Yeah.
Some people get very uncomfortable about that.
Yeah.
But one of the ways of you know, finding out who you are is to really look at your own values and
Mm.
see. And I use a lovely model developed by the Barrett Value Centre, which really looks at your values individually, from, are they, you know, are the values related to your needs? You know, I need to survive. I need to be loved or liked. I need to be good enough, which we all have
Yeah.
as values. But is there something more? Are you in, you know, being a leader because you want to make a difference? You want to make a better workplace? And I think it very much ties into you know, the whole concept of mental health in the workplace and mentally healthy workplaces. And for me, I've done a lot of talks over the last, oh goodness knows, 5-10 years on creating mentally healthy workplaces. And to me, it's holistic. It's all about empowering and trusting people. It's about creating that safe space. And so that's the number, you know, if either you want to do that as a leader, you want to do something for we, or if you want to do it for me, you're probably never going to become an adaptive leader.
Yeah. Just have a team of one.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's interesting that you kind of, you know, talked about holistic practice. So there's always, for me, there's this link between, you know, leadership, wellness,
Yep.
performance. You know,
Yep.
they're not sort of exclusive from one another. I think we really need to think of them holistically. And one of the things that I sort of have come across is that, you know, as you say, leadership can be, you can be born with it or you can learn it, and maybe somewhere in between are those people who want to become
Yep.
better leaders. But the good news is it is teachable and it is learnable.
It is.
But I don't think we do enough in our legal education sort of system to teach these skills. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, what can we do more?
I agree, and it's interesting. I was talking to someone at one of the law schools a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of law schools now across Australia and also in Western Australia. And I was also on the board of the College of Law in WA, and also spoke to them a lot about, we need to have, and people call it soft skills. Well, they actually, soft skill training, to me, it's actually not soft. It's actually quite
essential skills, we call them.
It's essential, and it's not soft, because to be an adaptive leader, you actually have to be even more in control of yourself and how you are behaving.
Yes.
So it's actually hard skills.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see more taught in the universities, taught in the, you know, the colleges of law and the other, you know, graduate grad schools. Because it is so important. And the only thing law firms actually really have, a lot of them have now a lot of apps and tech stuff, but it's people, and it's people. And as we go forward, and you know, a lot of the stuff that lawyers used to do before in discoveries and due diligences and sort of routine work will come more into artificial intelligence and sort of machine learning, which makes it even more important for the lawyers themselves to have
human skills,
the human skills, human and people skills, which I wouldn't call soft. I'd call them hard. But maybe I'll share. I don't know if this was just something intuitively, but over the years as managing partner, I developed a model which I think really guided me and our firm forward. And it was called Flow of Success.
Yes.
And it's sort of simple, and I've sort of drawn. So if you can imagine sort of 4 steps down, and the water starts here and flows. So number 1 focus for me was all about people, and it was about getting the right people of the right cultural fit in the right seat on the bus, and that's very much a Jim Collins philosophy. And how do you do that? Well, you do that through values, which are embedded in your processes and systems, through purpose. And most law firms will have values, but do they actually live the behaviours? It's comes through flexible work arrangements. It comes through how you train and develop people. It comes through how you you treat your people. And one of the biggest things we did in 2007 was change the way partners were remunerated in Minter Ellison Perth to a sort of behavioural performance system, of which a very large part of the assessment was how do they behave in accordance with the values.
Great.
And that was a very confronting thing in 2007, and some partners, and we did it by way of a anonymous 360-degree feedback using Chandler McLeod, who then debriefed partners on their results, because it can be quite confronting. You don't live the values. And some partners hated it, and some of our best performing partners, if you looked at financially, hated it, and they said, where's natural justice in this process? I need to be able to confront my accuser. And some of them left. But what was really, really interesting was that over time, not a very long time, and maybe I'll save this for at the end of the Flow of Success. The second one is around clients, and that to me is simply about creating relationships of trust through communication and delivering value. And how do you do that? Well, you understand your client, you understand their industry, you break down silos within your firm, so the right people are doing the right work. You do client reviews, etc., etc., and you really focus on value. And because you've got values which people live, people won't pad their timesheets, etc., etc., because it's training. Third one was what I called well-being, which was really organisational well-being, and that was around systems, processes, and governance. And then the last one is finance, which is you get a good financial outcome from 1, 2, and 3. And what you probably get, and what happened between 2006 and 2008 was revenue jumped significantly. Staff engagement went from abysmal to high 80s, low 90s, and staff turnover went from abysmal 50% to 12%. So it actually, I know it actually works. What it does mean though is if you're looking at the big firms, I think profit levels will be a little bit lower than some of the other firms, because you're not screwing people and you're not screwing clients. Not that I'm saying other firms do, but you've got to make sure that your leaders and partners are on board for that journey. They want to create something that's long-term sustainable, that's mentally, creates a mentally healthy workplace, and also makes money, but does it in a different order. Most professional services firms would put finance at the top.
I was going to say, yes.
And make their decisions around profit per unit, per team per month, utilisation, billable hours, average realised rate, etc. To me, they're the outcome.
Yeah, and I even love the sort of the image of that model that you've got on your website, which I will share in the link in this post. But it's a tap. Once you've got all those 3 components, then the tap, it will come out. Which makes sense. It makes perfect sense. So I just want to ask you sort of one question about leadership in law firms, and you sort of already touched a lot on what makes lawyers. I don't want to use any, I don't want to say terrible at leadership, but more challenged by leadership. And one of those is that ego that we tend to carry. What else do you think makes it a little bit more challenging, or is it more challenging for lawyers to be good leaders than people in other professions?
I think it has its own. I think it's challenging in all areas, but I think particularly in law firms, there are some unique challenges.
Yeah.
One comes from just the model, the sort of hierarchical model, and you've got lots and lots of partners who all sort of own the business and want to lead themselves. But I think, one of the things that we have in law firms is traditional remuneration models actually reward siloed behaviour. Because if most partners are assessed on the fees they bring in, the fees they manage, etc.
Yeah.
And so how do you herd cats? You've got to move the cat food a bit. So that innately within most law firms is what I call fertilizer for silos. And silos are like weeds. They spring up.
Yeah.
As soon as you got rid of one and another builds. So for me, leadership is very much about breaking down silos. And one of the things I remember from my Sydney experience with Squires is we started it from scratch. I can't remember, it must have been 2014, 15, whatever. And we ended up with about 100 people when I left in 2017, and only 10 partners, but they'd all come laterally, and we got lateral partners because they had strong client relationships and loyalty. One of the big challenges was turning it from my client into our client. And did a lot of work around collaboration, and that's hard. That's really hard. So there's innate things. The other thing is, I think people who tend to want to become lawyers do have certain they're probably more A-type personalities than maybe in other areas. So you've got inbuilt challenges, but when you get it coming around purpose and values, and it can be incredible fun. I mean, one of the I can talk too much, but
we love it.
Is one of the things I love to hear is people laughing in the corridors. I used to do floor walks regularly around I loved floor walks because you just be able to pick up what was going on. If you hear people laughing on the phone,
they're happy.
Be laughing with a client. The client's probably in a very stressful situation because they're using you, but you're making it easier for them. So when you can create that culture, and it's very hard to build and it's very easily destroyed. But when it's there, it's magic. It's just magic.
Well, I think this conversation was magic. As you know, talking to you is always magic, John. So thank you so much for your insights, sharing your experience. It's so valuable, and I really hope that people take something away from this. And I'm just going to share that you've recently become a mentor to me, and I'm really grateful to have you in my circle. And I look forward to continue talking to you. So thank you again for today, and we'll see you again soon.